Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining. My name is Marcos. I'm a DevOps engineer here at Whiteprompt. The idea of this space is for us to share knowledge and stuff that we find on our day-to-day work that we think that is good to share with everyone, that might be helpful to the people, to everyone. The topic that we're going to talk today is virtual Kubernetes clusters. This is actually like a regular cluster that resides inside a cluster. So as I said, this is a space to share knowledge of what we find. We have a YouTube channel where we'll be uploading this video, and we also have all the others OTT talks that we have. Let me go ahead and show you the agenda. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the benefits and use cases of vCluster. Afterwards, I'm going to talk about how to install it and how to create the vClusters. Then we will move on to the connection, some important facts, and a very short live demo. So for starters, the main benefit of having the vCluster instead of using namespaces for your tenants is that your tenants will now have full control over the cluster. When you use multi-tenancy and several namespaces, you have to manage a lot of the permissions, and your tenants, for example, are unable to list the namespaces that they own. The administrator needs to tell them what they own. So this reduces complexity. And this is also a very cheaper alternative to having multiple clusters for all your tenants if needed. It is also very fast to spin up a virtual cluster and also to destroy it. So this is great for development and testing environments. And the main benefit also from this is that the performance, networking, and storage is the same in the vCluster as in the host. You are using the same resources. Here's very short drawing of the benefits of using vCluster instead of using separate namespaces and separate clusters. As you see, vCluster has like all the best points from both worlds. So, and it is also completely free and open source. This is being developed by a company called Loft. So now I'm going to show you how to install it and how to create your cluster. The prerequisite is that you need Helm to correctly deploy the services that are going to be used to connect to the vCluster, and then you just need the vCluster CLI. Not a lot of prerequisites. The creation is very simple. You first need to create the namespace where your virtual cluster is going to reside. Afterwards, you need to create the service that is going to be used to connect to your virtual cluster. This is of the load balancer type. And then to be able to correctly create the cluster, there's an example below of a file called helmvalues.yaml that will be using the IP address of the service that you just deployed. And the command to actually create the vCluster is very simple. It's just vCluster, the namespace of the vCluster, and then the vCluster names. And we are passing the extra values that we updated beforehand in the Helm file. And here is an example screenshot that you see that I was able to create the namespace, then the service, and once the service was created and I have the IP address of the load balancer, I am able to create the vCluster and then connect to it. There are two ways to actually connect to the vCluster. If you run this command with the flag update current false, this creates a kubeconfig that you can share with all your tenants, and they will be connecting directly to the vCluster using this kubeconfig. You can also, through the console, if you have the vCluster credentials, because you are creating and then you want to enter it, you can just use this simple command, vCluster namespace and aconnect, and this connects you directly and changes the context automatically, so you can start running commands inside your vCluster. One of the ways that you can confirm that you're actually inside the vCluster is that, for example, in this screenshot, you can see that I don't have the namespace called A-team that I created in the host cluster. I only see the namespaces that live inside my vCluster. And also on the host, when you get the namespaces and everything that is deployed on the namespace that you created for your vCluster to live, you will see a pod, which is actually where the vCluster is living, just the vCluster resources. But then you see that, for example, the core DNS, the networking part, is being run on the parent cluster. As I said, all the networking, storage, and pods
We can't hear you.
Okay, I think I'm back.
Yep, you're back.
Sorry for interrupting you, Marcos. Would
Yeah.
you be so kind to make the presentation full screen?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, my bad.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, and now I'm going to be giving you a short demo. Okay, great. So I have a terminal. If you see now, I see the nodes from my host cluster. So what I will do first is that I'm going to create the namespace where the vCluster is going to live. I have my vdemo namespace created. And what I'm going to do now is create the service that is going to allow me to connect to the actual vCluster. Now, we need to wait a few seconds for the service to actually be created and that I have an IP address here at the load balancer because I need to pass these values to the Helm file to actually create and connect to the vCluster. This takes usually just a couple of seconds. There's also in the presentation at the bottom 2 examples of the service that you need to create to connect to the cluster, and also the Helm file. It's just a very short file, the Helm file. Okay, great. I have an IP address. Now, what I'm going to do is generate a variable which will contain the IP address. Let me actually confirm that I have it here. Yes, perfect. And now I'm going to create a vCluster in the namespace vdemo. My vCluster is also going to be called vdemo, and and I need to update beforehand the helm values.yaml with this IP address. Let me try that again. Actually, let's do it the easy way. There we go. And now, as you can see, I have the value here that I need. Now I'm going to create the vCluster. And once it is created, it actually connects you automatically to the cluster. We don't need that, but Just to show you, I'm going to be opening a new tab here. Let me actually get the credentials for the host cluster. Okay, great. So as you can see here, it is creating, and as I said, this creates a pod where the vCluster resources reside, but actually everything else is delegated to the host cluster scheduler. So as you can see here, there are no resources. Now I can actually connect to the vCluster and create a namespace called inside. Now, if I get the namespaces inside of the host cluster, sorry, in the virtual cluster, you will see that I have my inside. But if I do it in the host cluster, oh, sorry, I'm connected to this. Let me actually do it here. You can see here, now I'm in the host, but I don't see the inside cluster. I only see the vdemo one, which is the one that I created for where the vCluster is going to reside. So this, as I stated before, the benefit is that when you give the kubeconfig or the command to your tenants to connect to the vCluster, they can do everything they need. They are complete admins of their own virtual cluster. And you don't need to go ahead and handle permissions in the auth file, create a lot of namespaces, manage the resources. Everything is managed by the vCluster itself. And that's it for the demo. Let me actually share the presentation again. Let me give you one important fact. Well, as I've been saying, the services, the pod services and ingresses are created in the parent cluster. So the scheduler inside the virtual cluster is managing all the resources, but when it needs to create any of the mentioned resources, it delegates the task to the scheduler in the parent cluster. And let me actually show you the example. This is the Helm values YAML, where you pass the service, the load balancer IP of the service that you created. And the service is very simple. It's just a regular load balancer, nothing too complex here. And there's also a link here to the actual documentation where there's also other ways to deploy your cluster. This is just one of them. And that's it for the demo. Does anyone have any questions or concerns?
Yeah, just a quick question. Is there a local equivalent? Like, are we able to work locally with this? And kind of like Minikube.
Oh, yeah, no, I understand what you mean. I haven't actually tested it with Minikube. I've been, one of my clients have been using it for their development environment in AWS EKS. And for the demo, I've been using the GCP GKE. It should probably work with Minikube, but I haven't actually tested it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, Marcos and Diego. I have one question. Is like, which do you think is the use case, or how do you how the project you are working on use the vCluster?
Well, they are using it in their staging environment, which is actually the UAT environment. The developers are able to spin up their development environments to test, to test the application. And once they are done, they destroy these vClusters. And the other good part is that if you're working with other developers, you can actually share the kubeconfig of your resource cluster so you can work together without affecting the UAT part.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, if there are no more questions, well, as I said, this is going to be recorded and uploaded to our YouTube channel. And along with this presentation. Does anyone happen to have any more questions?
No, Marcos. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for this.
Again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Marcos.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marcos. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.